You were late, but that's all right.
That's pretty
Episode
close.
5. Well, pretty close is only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, right?
My man.
What's up, Relax Reps fans? We're back at it. Love all the love and support we've been getting. Shout out to all my friends at Ohio Northern. Shout out to the football team. Big dub yesterday. But yeah, appreciate all the love and support I've been getting. I know Dave has as well. So we're rocking and rolling, baby.
So this episode, I thought it'd be pertinent to dive into the recent Paul Tyson fight. To be fair, to level set here, I'm not coming into this saying I'm a striking coach and here's what should have happened. That's not the goal. The goal is to talk about the physiological differences between, I believe it was a 28 and a 58-year-old opponent. Again, feel free to fact check me all podcast long. I'm working from memory. No notes are up in front of me here. But I figured this is the best time to talk about it because at the time of recording, it had just happened. So we're looking at, what was it, 10 to 8 2-minute rounds, right?
Mm-hmm.
And standard boxing is 10 to 12 3-minute rounds. So a significant cut in the length of the event and in each round individually. So the things I want to really dive into are the physiological differences between a 28-year-old male opponent and a 58-year-old male opponent in a striking combat sport. Typically, you're dealing with significantly reduced muscle mass, right? You're looking at significantly reduced cardiovascular endurance. That just tends to happen with age. But I also did want to touch on the fact that Mike Tyson looks ridiculous at 58 years old. He is by no stretch your standard 58-year-old man or even your standard 58-year-old boxer. Looked phenomenal in terms of his strength and his build. And I think, personal opinion, in terms of his endurance, I think he did really well all 8 rounds, considering he's 50-fucking-8. And if memory serves me right, I think they weighed in at 227 and 228. And, a lot of people want to talk about, you and I have heard it at length as strength and conditioning coaches. What do skills coaches always say? He needs a deeper gas tank. He needs more gas. He needs more, more cardio. And when you're talking about a 220, call it 230-pound, 58-year-old man, I mean, he is built like a Mack truck. If you look at his back, I mean, the thing is wide as can be.
He's big.
Yeah.
He looked, and it was interesting too. I thought it almost seemed like Mike Tyson probably had to slim down to get to that weight. And I thought that Paul obviously weighed up. Before that fight, he looked fat as hell, and he kind of trimmed it back before the fight started. But it was interesting seeing that too, and kind of that difference. And one guy is almost probably doesn't. I'm sure Mike Tyson hopefully doesn't sit around 230 because I'm imagining he's probably sitting, I don't know, a little less than that or trying to. Probably after this fight, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so you talk about something interesting. We could do a whole episode around it, but weight cutting sports are an interesting beast because everyone thinks to move up, I just have to eat. And it's absolutely not, right? When you're talking about moving up a class, and this is kind of outside of that fight specifically because I don't know what they walk around at, but anybody that has to go up in a weight class, you don't want to just put on fat. Fat's not going to serve you. You want to try to put on muscle, which we're going to talk about hypertrophy in a later episode. That's a whole uphill battle.
It's coming.
And then you have guys, that are coming down to that weight class that are leaning out. So what mass they have on them does serve them well. So it's an interesting thing trying to go up or go down and trying to meet in the middle on weight classes, certainly. But more so the point I was diving into is, people want to talk about, he looked tired at the end of the fight. And it's he's a 58-year-old man. No doubt. And if you want to talk about the movement, I want to say I think his head movement was real solid. Sure, he got hit with a couple of shots, but when you look at, let's use the UFC as an example. If you look at the heavyweights moving around versus the featherweights moving around, a lot more movement happens at lighter weights because they don't have all that mass to carry around. So I don't know. I say all that to say when you look at Tyson from a cardiovascular standpoint in that fight, for a 58-year-old guy, I think he really hung in well. And again, not a standard 58-year-old guy. I mean, one of the best. But yeah, I thought it was an interesting fight. And looking through the lens of time, time is no one's friend when it comes to training. It makes everything
Yeah.
harder. For those that are unaware, right, or younger listeners, lifting and training as you get older means you need more recovery time. It means you need more prep work. It means if your goal is to get stronger or put on mass, that takes a lot longer, a lot longer. For building, cardio, sure you can do it, but again, you have so much less margin for error as you train as an older fighter, or an older athlete in general. So yeah, it's quite a big jump in age there, and with that age is just all the things around training that make it so much tougher. And again, personal opinion, make me respect all the work that Tyson put back in to get back into the ring, because
Yeah.
I mean, who wants to get up off the couch after? I think we looked it up in, again, working from no notes, totally memory here. I think it was like almost 20 years since his last fight.
Yeah.
Like that's
$40 million will do that, right?
that's a good incentive. That's a great incentive.
But it definitely, you could tell too, like, it seemed like Mike really had to take his training a lot more serious than Jake did. Just from the standpoint of, like, his fitness had to be on point. Like, the actual, like, skills coaching seemed like it was a little more focused and stuff versus the training that Jake was doing. That's just from an outside perspective, but especially when you're older and those things, and you can see this with athletes and just like normal people. Like the training as you keep getting older has to be more focused and it has to be more specific for you and what's going on with your body. Because I mean, 27 years old, you can throw a lot of things at me for a workout, and yeah, it might suck for like the day after or 2 days after, but I'm gonna bounce back fairly quickly. Versus if you gave that same crazy workout or whatever, or training or a specific fighting, whatever, if you give that to a 58-year-old, it might take them 5 days to recover. It might take them even more than that to recover, and they might still have things that like are nagging them from that one workout. So yeah, just things that I kind of caught as I was watching them prepare for this fight too.
I think I may have said this on an earlier podcast, so apologies for the repetition to our listeners here, but if I haven't, I think of training like the sport of tennis, and that when you watch young tennis players, it's a game of power. How can I smash that ball to the back corner and force my opponent to move and have to shuffle? I want to smash that ball. As you become an older tennis player, because looking at it from the outside, tennis is all about speed and agility. It's about how well you shift laterally. I mean, it's a multi-directional sport, which is tough. And then you add into that where you're planning to hit the ball. I mean, it really is chess. When you become an older tennis player, then it becomes that tactical game. You have to really, because you don't move like the younger players do. So lifting is like that, in that younger people can get after it with a lot more intensity and bounce back a lot quicker and play a hard game in the gym. Older athletes or clients need to take their time warming up, need to again progressively load to be able to continue to train for whatever they're training for. You need to allow that downtime and that recovery. I mean, training becomes a whole different beast at an older age, and to do it on that grand of a stage, I mean, again, shout out to Tyson.
Yeah, I thought too it was interesting kind of seeing like his ability to react and his ability to like dodge and react to Jake's punches. I definitely thought it was a little slowed, but obviously, I mean, 58 years old, that's usually like the first thing that goes is like your ability to kind of react.
The fast twitch.
Yes, exactly. So it was interesting seeing like, okay, he still got it sometimes, and then a couple other times like he gets hit in a spot that like he probably wouldn't have got hit at 20 or 30 years ago. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that could be from repetition too. Like, I mean, when you take 20 years off of doing something, you still have it in your core, like you still have that muscle memory, but it's not at the same fine tune like as you've had it in the past. So
that's an interesting one to dive into, right? It's like gross motor skills and fine motor skills. Like if I benched you for 2 decades and had you kick a football, can you still kick? Of course you can still kick. Can you kick with the same accuracy and precision that you could have 2 decades ago if I benched you for that time? Probably not.
Yeah.
Could you get back to a point where you're almost kind of sort of there? Possibly. That's a tall ask, though. And yeah, I mean, sport really does come down to that fine motor skill, same as tennis. Um, yeah, some of those things are just inherent, but the sharpness and the degree of it are eroded over time. That's the nature of the beast. And I don't want to go down a huge rabbit hole here. Mike Tyson looks like not many other 58-year-olds out there. I want to be very clear about that. I don't know what he did or did not take leading up to the fight, but I tell you what, that man built like a Mack truck. I mean, there ain't even 28-year-olds walking around looking like that 58-year-old. And that
Yeah.
man is shredded.
There's something too. So this is kind of funny. It brings me back to my college football playing days. We played with a couple guys that were former armed forces, former maybe a former Marine, former Army Ranger or something, and they were significantly older than a lot of the guys on the football team, right? So it's like I'm 20 years old and this guy is like 28, 29, maybe even 30 plus, and did a couple tours, right? That kind of stuff. And they haven't played football since high school. They want to get back into it, love the game, and they're playing for the team. And it was just like one of the guys, like you could tell he was really good at one point, and he even played a lot for us. And like towards the end of his like season, he was doing a lot of like starting and like being able to like really compete with the guys on the team. And then there's like other guys that just you could tell like he maybe wasn't that great of a player in high school, and then like he's trying to get back into it, and he's like now he's like 2 steps behind, and like he's really struggling, and he like got injured frequently, and I think that a lot of that came back to the point of yeah, you've been out of it for 10 years, and like you just can't react the same way as a 20-year-old can, on the line or on the ball count, or even small stuff. Like he was a defensive lineman, so like being able to like react to somebody and push somebody out of the way, hand fighting, that kind of stuff. That is something that is for the young, or somebody that is very experienced and has been doing it a long time, like those pro guys that are up in age in their 30s and maybe late 30s, early 40s. So yeah, interesting stuff. But
One other thing, because we do have a Q&A that we want to dive into, but tenacity is something that you cannot train.
yeah,
And, we see it all the time in the weight room, especially when you have teams. There are guys that do not want to be there. They would much rather be doing their skills work. There are some guys that don't want to do either, the strength work or the skill work. And there are some guys that will run through a wall if you tell them to. And that's a tough thing to coach. I don't think you can coach that into somebody. I think that comes from hardship through adversity. I mean, you're not just going to wake up one day and a switch is on and that dog is in you. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. And I mean,
that's so true.
Mike Tyson is a walking pit bull in the most respectful way. I mean, he's like the tenacity, the ferociousness, the build, the stock, the just intensity. I mean, it's easy to bash the Paul brothers, but I'll tell you right now, I would not want to step in the ring with Tyson. Not one bit of me wants to do that.
Yeah, no, but yeah, it is interesting, all that stuff, and we'll see, man. We'll see who he fights next. If it's somebody that's
True.
like 20 years out of their prime again, it's just going to be like one of those things. But
Yeah, as much as I want to bash him, I mean, he picks both of them pick their opponents very thoughtfully. And I mean, there is some skill to them. I'm not going to act like they don't deserve to be there. They're still stepping in the ring and putting on a show and training hard. But
yeah, and who's to say that like it felt like Mike Tyson was kind of like not going at his full potential a little bit. I felt like it was a little bit rigged, where like if Mike Tyson really got a hold of him a couple times, I think it would have been a little bit different. Or the other way, too. Like, I thought that they kind of both were just like, let's just get to the end of this fight and not have somebody get knocked out. When I definitely think they could have gone 4 or 5 rounds, somebody gets KO'd or somebody, like, falls on the ground, and then it's a different fight.
I won't say it was rigged. I mean, maybe it was. Who the fuck knows? But I will say I think things definitely stacked up. Things were set up, I think, to make it go the distance.
Yeah,
I'm not
for
saying there
sure.
was a clear cut winner beforehand. I'm not saying that. Again, maybe there was, but yeah, no, it was definitely made to be a spectacle of an event rather than an all out brawl.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, the wife and I were watching it, and she's like, why doesn't he just charge in? Why doesn't he just like go at him like full bore? I'm like, because if you get close to Tyson, I mean, if you watch his hands, the hooks, the speed and mass that he comes around with those hooks, it just takes
Exactly.
one. It just takes
Yeah.
one. And I think I could be wrong, but I think Paul had a reach advantage. It looked like he did. Maybe I'm
Yeah, I
making that
think
up.
he did a little bit too, but
And I thought again he kept his distance well because who's going to charge in on Tyson? I mean, you're asking for problems. I That's like sticking your hand down a garbage disposal. Like what? Why would you take that risk? There's no payoff in that. But yeah,
yeah.
again, it was entertaining to watch. Could have played out differently, but I give both fighters credit. Tyson
Yeah.
for being 58 and stepping back into that, you know, that scale of an event, and then Paul for taking on one of the best to ever do it.
Yeah. Set for life.
Say what?
Set
Set for
now you're set for
life.
life.
So I had the creative juices flowing, and texted Luke a couple of things that I want to dive into,
Absolutely.
based on some things that I was seeing. There's a controversial, starting things off, there's a controversial theory out there that sumo deadlift is cheating. To be clear, when I say cheating, there's conventional barbell deadlifts, and then there's sumo barbell deadlifts. You're able to lift significantly more load with sumo deadlifts because the bar has to travel a less great distance. Because I'm in the wide stance, my hips sit low, the bar doesn't have to travel as far. I'm gonna ask you, do you think it's cheating?
Me personally, no. I think it's because now being in kind of a different lens and seeing things a little bit differently, there's a lot of nuances and technical differences to each lift, to the conventional and to the sumo. And being able to coach them like to the way that they should be, I think it's a completely different lift, in my opinion. So like I wouldn't put someone's conventional deadlift up against a sumo deadlift just because they're different lifts. I would say that like that's like to me almost like a front squat versus a back squat. So like those numbers should be different in my opinion, and that's why I would just categorize them as different things. And I know that's probably a little bit different than what other people think, but um, yeah, to me, it's not anything that like we should like put our pitchforks out and
Form the mob.
storm around. Yeah, but I know that, but that obviously like I work with a lot of different people that have a lot of different opinions on that, and say different things about that and how conventional is the true way to do things and the only way to do things, and that's the original way that people have been lifting for like 100 years or whatever, and that's the true way to do it, right? And then there's also another different way to look at it. Like there's only one type of squat, and that's the back squat,
That's
and
the only
there's no
squat there
other type.
is. Nope.
Yes,
There's nothing
right. So
else.
like that's those are ways to look at things, and I just think that there's different ways to categorize and different ways to train and get strong in those different movements that I think they are. But
I say that because I think a lot of times people say, what are your numbers? What are you deadlifting? What are you benching? What are
yeah,
you this? What are you that? And if someone throws out a number, your mind goes to a conventional deadlift is what they're doing.
sure,
And you're like, wow, you're conventional deadlifting X number, and they're like, no, it's sumo. And the question is like, that's sumo. I think that's where the kind of root of the question began, is because people look at it as cheating through that lens. I totally agree with you though. They're different lifts, they're different patterns. I don't think you should be conventional deadlifting all the time. I don't think you should be sumo deadlifting all the time. I think a healthy program blends them in a way that serves the athlete best for what they're trying to accomplish and the anatomy of the client. Because some people out there, I mean, not all hips are built the same, and you got to pick the right pattern for your athlete and what you're trying to achieve.
no,
So
that's a
yeah,
good point. I will say too, like the strongest deadlifts in the world are all conventional though. Like if you look at all the 1,000-pound deadlifts, They're all conventional. They're not sumo. So I don't know. At least in my opinion, and the things I've seen, I've never seen a conventional.
Think of what they could do if they did sumo, though.
I don't know. I
Pure,
mean, it's the same thing like a front squat. I've never seen somebody front squat like 700, 800 pounds, but I'm sure somebody might text me and be like, hey, dumbass, here it is. There you go. But like back squat, like a lot of people can get up in heavy weight, like 900 to 1,000 pounds in a back squat that I think is, I don't know, just a little bit difference.
there is something to be said, too, for the regulation of the competition. The lifts that you're seeing, I'm sure the organizing bodies have, a very strict layout for how the setup and execution of said lift has to go. But yeah, no, to your point, different lifts favor different loads and different anatomies too. Next question. It's kind of a two-parter. I was seeing a dumbbell deadlift be done with toes elevated, and we'll get to that. But first, I want to start off with elevating heels on a squat pattern. Could be a front squat, could be a goblet squat, could be a back squat. I don't care. But we're squatting, and we're elevating our heels. For us coaches, typically we'll do that if someone has limited ankle mobility, so they're not able to sink down into the depth on their squat that we'd like to see. If I elevate the heel, I'm not asking as much range of motion out of the ankle. Thus, I get the squat at the depth that I would like to see as a coach. That's about the only time I'll throw that in there. We've done some funky variations with cyclist squats. To those not listening, if you do a squat, then you keep an upright posture and you elevate your heels and you let your knee glide out way over your toe. Oh no, you're going to put an immense amount of force in your quads to do that squat. It makes it thus a whole lot more quad dominant. Any thoughts on elevating heels? Do you do it a lot? Do you coach it a lot? Is that a starting place for you and you work back from it? Anything to add there? Just a tool in the toolbox for our listeners.
Yeah, I would say with heels elevated, definitely not a starting point. That's like my last thing for me. I would say I try to get, and it also depends on what we're looking for. So if we're doing some like movement screen or something and you're looking for hip mobility and hip range of motion, then yes, like you're starting with their heels elevated. But if I'm just trying to see them squat just normally and just say like, hey, I want you to squat up and down 5 times, I'm not going to have them do it heels elevated. Or even like if we're starting with load, I probably won't like, not crazy load either. Maybe like when they're starting, getting into it, I'm not going to have them do a 1 rep max and not see like how their hips and their ankles move.
But coach, what if their knee hurts?
Their knee hurts. They can, we'll figure it out from there. I would say like if their knee hurts, we probably shouldn't be squatting anyways.
Oh, really? You're eliminating all squatting.
Okay, stop it. I would say, like, maybe not to the heaviest point. Maybe if their knees are really hurting, we might go to a single leg variation of a squat. We might do some machine work or something. Figure it out until their knee starts feeling better, and then we go from there.
Their knee hurts, so you're going to have them squat on one leg? Doubling the force on that knee, Lukey.
No, not... All right. I see what you're doing here. I see the little...
For the people listening that don't know, I like to bust Luke's chops a bit. I'm giving him a hard time. You could pivot any number of ways for any number of scenarios here. He doesn't like to elevate the heel, apparently. I don't love to elevate it, but if we need to, I accept it,
I mean, especially with like new clients, my goal is to try to get them to do that mobility and that range of motion without adding more levels to this or adding more pieces or complex parts to this. So, like I'm going to try to start them without any support from anything. And then maybe we work on a little more ankle mobility and then hopefully that gets better. And if that's something where they've had some pre-lying conditions where they've had an ankle surgery or they have some mobility issues that they've had for years, that might be a position where, okay, well, now the goal is to really work on loading this movement, not just mobility. So we will elevate the heels and we will try to load that heavier, right? But yeah, that's for me. I mean, this is funny. I had I won't say where this was, but I've had in the past in my coaching career, I've had children that I've worked with that are 10 to 12 years old that argue with me and say they need to have their heels elevated to squat.
Okay.
And I just tell them that sucks, and you are going to squat with your feet on the ground with no heels elevated because you're 10 years old and you shouldn't have any issues squatting with your feet on the ground. You're 10 years old, right? So I think for me, and even if you've been doing sports your entire time and you're a hockey player that doesn't have great ankle range of motion or whatever, I want to train that ankle range of motion and that mobility, and I want to work through those things, and you're going to have to figure that out. And that's why for me at least, if you're 10 years old and you can't squat with your ankles on the ground, we get to 16, 17, 18 years old and we just let you do that, then that mobility is now completely gone. And now you're really going to have some issues down the road. Not even just in your playing career, just in life. Like if you lose all your ankle mobility, like it's going to be hard to do certain things moving forward.
So what I'm hearing from you is if an athlete doesn't have good ankle mobility, they have no chance of making it in the NHL.
That is exactly right. Yes, absolutely. Actually hit up our old bosses and hit up everyone that's in the hockey community, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, Luke, you're completely right on that one." But
just had to have some fun and poke you there. No,
Yeah.
I agree I agree to an extent that we should train what mobility we can to allow for healthy full range of motion lifting. And I'm curious why those young athletes said that they needed to elevate their heels, but that's a whole can of worms we won't open yet.
Exactly.
And again, the root of this kind of tangent that we wanted to go down was I saw a dumbbell deadlift to be specific, being done with toes elevated. I don't care for it. So to people listening, if you take a pair of dumbbells, you put them, by your front pockets, bend your knees, hinge your hips back. We're working our glutes and our hamstrings. Pretty straightforward. The idea of elevating one's toe is to pull slack out of the distal end of the hamstring in your calf to get more from the proximal side of your hamstring and your glutes.
Yeah.
It's just a different angle to attack the muscle from. It's fine as variation, but again, I think, and this goes out to kind of the bodybuilding community, for people that are beginning their training journey, you don't need something specialized like that. I think you can get into a lot of different tricks in terms of form and setup, and we'll talk about this in our hypertrophy episode, but you can get into a lot of variations and fancy things if you have a training age of 5 years old or more. If you've really, been consistent for 5 years and laid that foundation, sure, get fancy, get weird, get tricky. But beginners, like Luke said, you're adding more setup to an exercise that could already be effective. What are we doing this for? Any thoughts?
No, that's interesting. And I listened to something recently talking about how if you're using advanced training, this person kind of thinks of it as advanced medicine, right? So like if you're somebody that needs advanced medicine, it probably means that something's really wrong and you're sick. Like there's something that like now you have to go see somebody that's a specialist and they specialize in this, and the only way that you can treat it is by seeing this person.
Yep.
So I kind of think of that as training too, in a lot of ways, that if we're getting to a point where you're so specialized and we can only do these things in very certain ways and certain movements with our toes up and different things, then I think we're losing a little bit of the other side of that. And you should be, at least most people should be able to train and get good training benefits and results from basic movement patterns and maybe the little nuances of things and changing it just a little bit, right? Like I think that you could get the same benefit of that as having just a straight leg RDL and having that same stretch in your hamstring, I guess maybe not the exact same, but very similar way versus having your toes up and losing the feeling of where your feet should be and how you should put pressure into your heel and into your big toe and into your pinky toe and maybe in the base of your foot. I don't know. Things like that too. But
Yeah, if you're not laying the foundation of strength before you move into specialized programming, you're building your house on quicksand.
yeah.
Um, Warm ups, more specifically, cardio for your warm up. How do you feel about that, Luke?
Cardio in the warm up, just like so you're getting ready for your lift, and instead of getting some extra sets of whatever that movement is, or like priming those muscles, we're just doing cardio instead, right? Is that the
Mm-hmm.
idea?
Mm-hmm. For warm up, I just want
Yeah.
you on the treadmill 5 minutes, casual walk.
It's hard for me to not just like shit all over this.
Okay, I'll save you some
No,
time.
I would say so. So what I would say too is like, if it's a day where, let's say it's just a recovery day, right? Like if it's a one of my Sunday lifts with one of my teams where we're just getting in and we're moving, and we're trying to get blood flow, we're trying to get a little bit of a sweat and those kind of things. I could see maybe where if you wanted to try to put 5 minutes of cardio in, maybe. I don't. Would I do it? I still probably wouldn't do it, but I could maybe see where you could put it. But
Fair. I want to talk to the adult Gen Pop client. If your goal is to get stronger and your cardio is something moderate, wasting your time.
yeah.
If your goal is hypertrophy, wasting your time. If your goal is weight loss, maybe you can get by with that. Maybe it'll pass. Maybe it'll fly. But realistically, a warm up, I think, should serve to get your heart rate up a little bit, get the muscles, a bit active, get the blood flowing, and prep for the activity we're about to dive into. So, let's say I walk on the treadmill for 5 minutes and it's a bench day. What in our chest did we prepare?
Yeah.
Even if I'm going to hop on the stair climber because it's a leg day. Sure, your quads got some work, hamstrings and glutes kind of sort of barely. I don't know, maybe. I think you're better served with a dynamic warm up or, like you said, let's get on, assuming barbell back squat, because that's the only squat there is our main lift for the day. Do 2 to 3 prep sets so that you can actually load when you start your day. Yeah, I think that would better serve you. However, I want to point out to those listening, if your workout starts with cardio as the focus, I'm not bashing that. If you're training for an event and cardio is what you start with and then you move to your lift, that's fine because it's intentional in its placement. But to say I'm going to do 5 minutes of purposeless cardio to prep for my lift, I think you're wasting your time. I do think you're wasting your time.
Yeah.
But I also want to circle back to the client that says, I don't want to warm up. I don't need a warm up. That bugs me so bad. I used to really battle with it as a coach and say, you have to have warm up. You have to have warm up. I've gotten to the point now to where the conversation becomes, I'm going to include it. You're welcome to skip it. But know that doing so only puts you at greater risk of injury and eats into your results. Are you prepared for that? Most of the time, you're like, all right, I'll do a warm up.
Yeah. Or you could even sprinkle in like 3 or 4 extra sets of whatever that movement is. So
Absolutely.
if they don't want to do a normal warm up, it's like, okay, then we'll just add 4 more sets of bench press and like so maybe a little bit lower intensity, and then you kind of pick up the intensity, and then you move into your working sets. I think that's a good way to kind of sprinkle that into, or just like, hey, and as we're warming up those bench press sets, we're gonna get some band break in, and like we're gonna get our posterior shoulder warmed up, or we might do some tricep work, and things that are gonna get you ready for if that was an upper body day and a bench press movement day, getting those muscles that you use for the bench press prepared. And I did like that too. I like the like it has to be specific for what's going on. So maybe if you're getting ready for a Spartan race, or I don't know, name one of those things that like you're doing running, you're lifting, you're doing a lot of things at once, and you're going to do it all in the same like hour block. Like, yeah, maybe you do 5 or 10 minutes of some cardio and then go into some strength work, and because it's going to kind of mimic what the demands of a Spartan race or whatever those are for what you need. So
To be clear, I fully support warm-ups. I fully support cardiovascular training, but do not confuse light to moderate intensity cardio with preparing your muscles to take on load. They are not the same task.
Awesome, and that's a wrap, guys. Appreciate all the feedback and the listening. If you still got some questions for us or thoughts on whatever you want us to talk about, please do it. We've got some big things coming. We're going to be talking about hypertrophy. We're going to talk about gaining mass and losing mass, and kind of a couple of different things that we've dived into. So yeah, all right, ready, break.
That was dialed in.
All right.